YouTube Ozzico and the Goat House is back. And today we're talking about Jalen Ramsey because the star cornerback sure sounds like he very well could be dealt within the next week or so here. Teams get together at the Combine. They discuss all those types of things. So maybe it's right around the corner here. So a star player potentially on the move. In this video, we're going to talk about all the details when it comes to Jalen Ramsey, his contract, what it means for the Rams, teams acquiring Jalen Ramsey, what it means for the future, value, trade value, and then I will talk about the landing spots. I'll rank the top landing spots, and then we'll talk about some scenarios where you guys will kind of have a say at the end which scenario makes the most sense. So really excited about this. Like, subscribe to notifications on. We have full NFL coverage here. Cover everything NFL. There's a bunch of videos covering the offseason on the channel. Definitely more to come. Combine starts this week. We'll have winners and losers each day. We'll have a post-Combine mock draft. So join us. Follow us on Twitter. Very important. Already talked about a handful of this stuff on Twitter. Link in the description and the comments, pinned in the comment section, as well as our Discord link is down there. And our sponsors, GLD Shop, Liquid IV, Walk the Mock. I have the LA Rams chain from the GLD Shop on right now. They have all NFL logos and a lot more. So check it out. Links pinned in the comments. So here's some important details on Jalen Ramsey and other things here. He turns 29 in October. I think the funniest thing, the strangest thing right now is people are almost talking like Ramsey's old. Like, oh, he's going to be 29 in October. Like, I like to think 29 is pretty young. You know, he's not in his 30s yet. I know he's close. He's still playing at a very high level. I still think you can argue he's the best corner in football for sure. I think people are, because the league is kind of changing when it comes to the young corners. It used to take like a few years at least for young corners to develop into something. Almost like it used to be for quarterbacks. But lately, I mean, rookies been dominating. Look at Sauce Gardner this year. So I think people are just insisting that you're just going to get a young guy. He's going to be great. The old guys aren't that good anymore. I don't think that's the case. I think it's the case for some of the young guys like the Sauce Gardners that are able to be that good right away. But Ramsey's special talent. People don't realize he's actually an elite zone coverage corner. I think he can be an elite man corner as well. He has some experience shadowing top receivers. He has experience in the past playing man, but really the Rams ran zone coverage. They were actually the least amount of in man coverage, the least amount in the NFL this year. They ran cover 4 more than anybody. They also ran a good amount of cover 3, which typically good man coverage corners can play cover 4, usually sticking on your man until you have to let him go on the inside. You're usually doing that down the whole quarters of your side there of the field. So that could make some sense there. But the Rams and Jalen Ramsey have been really good zone coverage team recently. A lot of cover 4 over the last several years. Even when Brandon Staley was there was some man, but there was still a lot of cover 4. He's also a very good tackling corner, which he doesn't get enough credit on. He's constantly flying up to the ball. The last couple of years, just seeing him make so many crucial stops with good hits, good tackles just before the sticks on third down, whatever it may be. So that's where he's actually somehow underrated. He might be the best in football doing that. So I do think he's elite still. I do think, was he the best cornerback in football on this year alone? No. Wasn't super far off, but in general, who's the best corner in football? I think most of us probably would say Ramsey still. If the Rams trade him, they clear $5.6 million. That is not a lot, but if they designate him a post-June 1st trade, they clear $17 million. It doesn't mean they have to wait till June 1st to trade him. They can trade him now and designate him as a post-June 1st trade, which each team has 2 of those. But they wouldn't get those savings until after June 1st. Maybe the Rams are just more worried about the future right now anyways, rather than right now. They don't want to clear all that space. They don't really care if they clear all that space now. We'll see where their head's at. They could be focused on the future. If a new team trades for him, on your screen in white there is the cap hits per each year left on his deal. So 2023 would be $17 million. It's a lot of money, but that's pretty good for Ramsey in my opinion. $18.5 million next year. Which you can cut him and clear a good chunk of that in 2024, but that wouldn't be ideal. You're not trading for Ramsey just to cut him in a year. And then 19.5, which is pretty pricey, but a good corner. But that year, there is zero guaranteed money. That's 2025, zero guaranteed money. So you actually, if he's not working out or you don't want to pay that, you can cut him and free every penny of that $19.5 million. But the main talk right now is the cap hit for this year, if a team acquires him, is going to be $17 million. He may be looking for a new deal. I know Florio reported that he thinks he could be looking. He didn't say for sure. I could see that too because maybe he thinks he's worth $20 million. He can get more than $17 million perhaps. You got to think he thinks he's the best corner in football still. So could be looking for a new deal. That could mean a raise, adjusting the deal to give him more money, or an extension, and both, or maybe the extension is more money, but the current years on the deal is the same. It could be all of the above, but I would assume he's looking for, or any of the above, but I would assume he's looking for a raise. Again, we talked about the cap hit for this year could be 17. It will be 17 million if you acquire him, but if you extend him plus restructure, or forget the extension, just restructure. Which, if you didn't know, restructure is not a pay cut. Obviously, some people think that, but Ramsey's obviously not going to take a pay cut. Restructure is different. But doing a restructure or restructure and extension, you actually can clear some of that $17 million from this year. You actually can take a chunk of that. I'd estimate around $10 million, and you can push it to future years. Of course, the future years cap hits will be very expensive, but the point is, if a team doesn't have that $17 million but want to trade for Jalen Ramsey, they don't actually have to have $17 million. I'd prefer a team that has a little more comfortable. They're in a little more comfortable spot, so they can do other things as well. But yeah, the point is, he actually possibly might not cost as much as 17 against the cap this year. A team could very well just keep it 17 mil because they don't want to. They can afford that, and they don't want to push the money down the line in future years. Value to me is a late first round pick or multiple day 2 picks. If it's multiple day 2s, maybe there's a future pick or a day 3 pick in there as well. I was saying this the other day. I was covering a lot of this on Twitter the other day. If you're not following our Twitter, you're missing out. Talking about a lot of it. I talk about when anybody's mentioned as a potential cut or trade, I talk about all the financial stuff and things like this right away on Twitter. But I was talking about this value the other day, and then Peter King, who talks to people around the league, he had a article earlier today actually that said basically the same thing. He can see a late one or a package of picks is the word he used, package of picks in day 2, maybe a future picks involved. So it was almost the same thing as what I was saying. So I think we're on the same page, but that doesn't mean we're going to be 100% right. Maybe the value drops. If he demands a new deal, I think there's got to be a team that still values him very highly if he needs a new deal. I don't think the age thing's a problem. I've seen people, he's going to be 29, so the value probably drops. I don't know. I don't know. Honestly, I think they should get a late one for him. I think they could, value-wise, talent-wise, I think his value could be more than just a late one, But, again, the cornerback class is really good. Some young corners are figuring it out right away. So maybe you'd rather have the picks. Maybe that drops his value a little bit there. So that's my take on all that. So it's some important details here. Now we can talk about some landing spots. And, of course, there could be a lot of landing spots here. So you see on the right, before we get into my top 6, I narrowed down the top 6. I'm actually blocking this, per usual. So there's kind of like a code at the bottom. Very realistic teams in blue, possible teams in yellow, and kind of wild card / dark horse teams I listed in white. So you see some teams down there. I know a lot of people are mentioning the Bengals. I see that a lot. A lot of people mention the Bengals. To me, the Bengals have, no matter who they have at corner, they got them playing at a pretty good level, like better than expected. I mean, they had a rookie in there, Cam Taylor-Britt, who I like a lot, playing very well. And they have Eli Apple playing better than what he's supposed to be in the past. I know Wouzier was hurt last year, but I don't think corner's going to make or break that defense. They're so well coached. They're all about being balanced. And they have focus on some other things. They have cap space to make some moves this offseason. I think the focus is on the offense line. And then for cap space in the future, where it comes to Ramsey with his expensive future years, even if he wants a raise or extension even more. So I think the future focus is on Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase. But right now, they don't really have to focus on those guys. But when it comes to getting a guy that's expensive for the future, they do have to kind of watch out for that. I just don't think they're going to value corner that. I mean, they'd be nasty with Jalen Ramsey, right? But that defense is going to be good either way. So a lot of people mentioned the Bengals, though. The Bills, I think they probably have to move on from Tre'Davious White, who took a step down, but it was a while since he played when we saw him come back. A lot of people mentioned the Chiefs, but they don't value the position either. They let Ward walk last year. They just keep bringing in young guys and finding hidden gems, and they haven't worked out. Eagles, could they let Bradbury walk, bring in Ramsey? Falcons, could make an elite corner duo, but maybe they're more focused on the future. I seen some odds, like some Vegas odds or some app, some website had the Falcons at 1. I don't agree with that, but we threw them in here. On Twitter, I talked about the Jags a little bit, but thinking about it a little bit more, they're tight on cap this year. Ridley coming in will be a cap hit as well. They're trying to figure out a free space and get better at positions that's going to make or break them. Looking at interior offensive line, getting Jawan Taylor back. So I don't know if the focus could be on a guy like Ramsey. So I took the Jags, getting him back off. And I did adjust my rankings a little bit when I was talking on Twitter, but kind of the same idea. In yellow, the possible landing spots. Patriots and Giants are kind of in the same boat. These are pure man coverage teams. Like, they run man more than anyone. And teams switch up coverages by year if they change staff, or sometimes they keep the staff, but they change players, because sometimes it's more about adjusting towards the players if you get really good players. But these teams, Belichick defense, Martindale defense, they're gonna be man coverage defenses. Of course, Ramsey is talented enough to play man coverage, but he's so good in zone. And for some guys, zone's harder. For some guys, man's harder. But NFL teams really want to run zone for the most part, because you're better off like fooling quarterbacks or offenses that way. So I think, do you trade value for him and spend money on him just to play a lot of man? I think he's more likely to go to a team that's going to mix in a more zone, specifically looking for cover 4, but could be cover 3 as well. Commanders, I think it's a scheme fit there. They'll play some cover 4 based on last year, and they could use a corner. Right when the news came out that Ramsey was a landing spot, or Ramsey was available via trade, I thought Commanders was one of the top landing spots, because they're about to clear a lot of money. They actually just got rid of Bobby McCain earlier, who's a safety but played in the nickel a bit. They cut him earlier a couple hours ago. But backtracking a little bit, I thought right away they would be a top landing spot because of fit. Looking for a corner, they're going to cut Carson Wentz. It's going to clear a good amount of space. And thinking about it a little more, I do think they're a possible landing spot, but I think focus could be elsewhere. They have a Chase Young option coming up. They need to get Deron Payne back, I think it's going to be a franchise tag, and then they can see if they can work on an extension. It'd be better off with the extension, because then they're not stuck with the full franchise tag as a cap hit right away. And then they're focused on the quarterback position perhaps, or they can stick with Sam Howell. So maybe the focus possibly could be elsewhere. The Texans, somewhere in the rebuild stages, so that right away you would think no for Ramsey, but they might be able to turn this around quicker than you think. They have a good amount of draft capital where they could make this trade happen. A potential elite cornerback duo, Ramsey and Stingley, in that DeMeco Ryans defense, and they can get that out of the way and kind of focus with the quarterback and receivers and pass rushers with the rest of the draft picks in the money in the offseason, which they have a bit of. The Vikings need a corner maybe more than anybody in football. They have Flores coming in. Flores is more of one of those guys that's going to go man coverage, keep the corners in the island. Of course, Ramsey can do that, but if you wish, I think best case he goes to a team that mixes it up a bit at least, or runs a bit of zone. Vikings a little bit of a hole in cap space as well, but if they clear out, possible. And at the top of the more landing spots list, I have Steelers and Cowboys. Steelers could use a corner. Mike Tomlin usually runs more man, but I saw 2 years ago they ran a bit of zone, so he's open to mixing it up a bit. Once they make some moves, they'll have some cap space. They need a corner. This would really elevate them. Their pass defense wasn't as good this past year, but it's still always pretty good. I trust it. They just haven't valued, maybe why they're not in the top 6. And they have the draft picks to trade, too. They have that first pick in the second round, which is actually the 31st pick from the Bears. But they haven't really valued the cornerback position. They haven't really spent big money there. They have Cam Sutton as a free agent. Do they just get him back? Look for some cheaper options and focus on building around Kenny Pickett. Maybe more likely, the Cowboys always looking to make some splash moves. They could use Ramsey. 2 years ago, they were mainly cover 1. They mixed it up a little more zone in there in Dan Quinn's defense last year. Maybe more focused on receivers, that offense, getting some guys back perhaps. But I can see it. But on to the top 6. I tweeted out my top 5 or so the other day, and I adjusted it a little bit as I had more time to think and go through how much cap space teams could have compared to what they have now, and what they could be willing to trade, and how badly they need a guy like Ramsey and fit. Those are the reasons I adjust a little bit. But I put the Titans at 6. In terms of fit, if you were to just rank off fit, they would probably be 1 or 2, like just scheme fit. pretty much a scheme fit, they'd be 1 or 2 with another team we're going to talk about. Because we talk about the Rams ran the most cover 4 in football last year. The Titans ran the second most cover 4, but they'll mix some things up as well. They'll run some 2-man under. So I think Ramsey could really fit that very well. The Titans I consider a very solid defense. They have the best run defense in football. They have some studs on that defense. The pass defense was a little iffy last year. I know they had a lot of injuries. Harold Landry was out for the whole year. Corner struggled a little bit. It's pretty much they just need one corner in there, and that's about it for that defense. And they need to get David Long Jr. back. So if they add Ramsey, which is home state is Tennessee, and there's been talk about him wanting to play in there in the past. So for all those reasons, and they've recently cleared a lot of space. For all those reasons, the Titans look like a legit landing spot, and that's why they are in the legit top landing spots category. But at the same time, I do think the focus could be elsewhere because that defense should be able to compete no matter what. They got to get better on offense. That offensive line's a mess right now. When they were in the playoffs, it seemed like it was a pretty good offensive line, I should say. Offensive line's a mess right now. They need a left tackle pretty badly. They might need both guards. Some talk about them letting Nate Davis walk. Ben Jones could retire at any time. They're pretty much set at, if Ben Jones is playing, they're set at center for now, and then they're set at right tackle at Nicholas Petit-Frere from Ohio State last year. So they need offensive line help. They need receiver help. I mean, they could use a tight end as well, and they could kind of monitor the quarterback situation there. So there's just, their defense going to be fine. And there's just so much focus on the offense because they're going to try to stay and win now. They're going to insist on winning now, and they're going to try to turn around that offense right now. So I think the focus will be there. So I kind of bumped them down the top 6 list, but there's a lot of reasons where it makes sense. Dolphins I had at 6, I bumped up to 5. They need a corner pretty badly. Really going to depend on what it's going to depend on multiple things here. What Fangio wants to run. The recent years we've seen him coach was more of a man coverage guy. With the Broncos that last year, a lot of cover 1. Just single high free was Justin Simmons, and we've seen some cover 0 in there as well. So if he's strictly going to run that, I don't see them interested, but he's had some zone in his background in the past. I can see them, sometimes these guys, they that like cover 1, they also usually like cover 4 as well. So I could see that. They need a corner pretty badly. First glance, they don't have cap space. They're actually negative, but you look a little more into it, they're going to clear a bit amount of space. They're probably going to restructure Tyreek Hill, Bradley Chubb, Teron Armstead. Those 3 guys and maybe a few other guys as well are possible. They're going to do a post-June first cut on Byron Jones. That gets them to well over 30 million in cap space. Pushing possibly over 40. Ballpark area, so that they actually are in a pretty decent situation. Then, why I don't say great is because they do push a lot of money in the future, but they could afford Ramsey that way. But they do have other needs as well. And then the other question is, what are the Rams looking for? The Dolphins are limited on picks this year. They don't have a first-round pick this year, obviously. But they could offer that next year first. And the Rams actually could be very interested in the next year first rather than some of these other teams we're going to talk about, a late first or an early second and a package of picks in day 2, taking that Dolphins next year first, because maybe the Rams are looking to go up and get one of those star quarterbacks in next year's class when they have Stafford played out this year. So getting an extra first next year could actually make some sense. Maybe they get a day 2 pick from the Dolphins this year since it's a next year, who knows, but that actually could be appealing. The more I think about that, at first I had the Dolphins at 6, but the more I think about that actually could be more appealing than you think. So you bump them up a little bit, but do the Dolphins want to focus on corner? Do they want to have a lot of money spent at the cornerback position? Remember, they have Xavier Howard. Maybe they just want to get a little bit of a cheaper guy in free agency or draft a guy. Would the Rams be okay accepting the deal with like a next year first? So there's some questions there with the Dolphins, but a possibility. On to number 4, the Baltimore Ravens, who value corner very, very highly. They actually happened to trade for a former Rams corner, Marcus Peters, and that worked out well for them. He was a very good corner for them and kind of fit at their time, their man coverage scheme. And then Peters is a free agent. He had a little bit of an off year, had some injuries pop up. I think they're going to move on from him, and they're going to bring in somebody else. When they moved on from Martindale and brought in McDonald, I thought it felt like, and it is true, they were kind of trying to go towards more zone, and we saw that a bit this year. A good mixture of man and zone. They're not going to go straight to mainly zone. kind of ease into it. But I do think they're trying to go more zone, so Ramsey would make sense for that reason. They value corners very, very highly. Good, especially good ones like this. I don't think that changes. Harbaugh's still there. The front office is still there. They're gonna value a guy like Ramsey. And then people may say, well, they got to pay Lamar Jackson still. And I see the point. But if they pay him, they could backload it, and they have like $24 million in cap space right now. So if they backload it, they'll still have a decent amount in cap space this year. And then they could trade Lamar Jackson. There's been some talks about they're pretty far off. They can slap a tag on him, trade him, and they have more space available. They have more picks. They can trade a pick for Ramsey and still have a bunch of picks left over from Lamar trade. Find that quarterback. Who knows? Maybe you're better. Because the Ravens, maybe they just value different things, compared to other teams. So I can actually debate against they can't afford it because they got to pay Lamar Jackson. That's really technically not true. But if they want to pay Lamar Jackson, if they don't want to backload it and they want to sign a bunch of other guys back and a bunch of new guys, then you could argue, maybe they can't afford it then. So that's possible. But I guess that's really not a downside for me with the Lamar Jackson situation. Maybe a little bit because where's their focus? Where's their focus at? But mainly the downside is they already have a lot of money tied to Marlon Humphrey. I know they value corners very highly, but maybe they don't want to tie more money to a star corner, and they do want to focus on receivers finally. So maybe that's why they're not higher on the list. They're probably the first team I thought of. I talked about the Commanders were one of the first teams I thought of when it first hit, like Ramsey. Breaking news, Ramsey could be dealt. The Rams got calls. They're talking. They're looking to trade him. The Ravens really popped up because the way they value corners, and they're trying to shift towards more zone, but probably bumped them down a little bit because focus. I mean, where's the focus at? On to the top three. Panthers, who the other day when I talked on Twitter, I had at number 2. And we got some news coming in. The Commanders have cut Carson Wentz. I actually talked about that in this video that'll be coming. But the Panthers, who I actually originally talked about on Twitter, I originally had them at 2, bumped them down to 3 just because I was feeling somebody else bumped them up. But when I talked about the Titans, I talked about when we're talking about pure fit, I said 2 teams were probably the best, the Titans, and here's the other one, the Carolina Panthers. In terms of pure fit, the Panthers bring in Ejiro Evero, who was with the Rams for a bit, then was with the Broncos last year. So he coached Jalen Ramsey. But not only that, but the scheme. The Rams, obviously, what they ran was where Ramsey was at when Evero was where he fit. Obviously, Ramsey fit Evero's defense when he was in LA. But then when he went to Denver, he continued running that defense. They ran a lot of cover 4 last year, under him, which we expected, which I kind of predicted in the offseason. So now he's going to Carolina. I'd imagine he continues to run that defense that Ramsey fits very, very well. So right there, it's a scheme fit. It's a player fit. You have that connection. You have the scheme fit though as well. They could use another corner. You could debate. I know Panthers fans really think that we need another corner. Understand it. You can debate they can survive without adding a starting corner because J.C. Horn is fantastic, obviously. Dante Jackson's been, when he's on the field, he's been all right in the past. A little better zone than man, which they ran a little bit more man last year. So they're going to run more cover 4. So health is the concern there because J.C. Horn injured in both of his seasons, obviously played a good amount of games in both those seasons, though. And Jackson had some injuries. And they do have C.J. Henderson, who has some upside, but he got beat a little bit, especially in that big Buccaneers game at the end of last year. But I think I like Evero, their new defense coordinator, could make guys get the most out of those guys, make them better. So they could very well stay put, or they can look to move Dante Jackson and then keep Henderson as a rotation guy and then trade for Ramsey. And then again, Horn has the injury concern too. So adding a top tier corner could be big. And it is pretty important for Evero's defense. So for those reasons, it does make sense. It doesn't look like they have a lot of cap space right now. They did recently restructure Austin Corbett's deal, so they're starting to clear. They're probably going to restructure Moton's, DJ Moore's, clear a little more space, maybe cut a guy or here and there. And they actually have a lot of cap space next year. So Ramsey, if they get him, they also can restructure him and then push money to the back years where they have a lot of cap space. So even though it doesn't look like it, if you look at just the second, this year's cap space, they actually very easily could afford Jalen Ramsey, especially for the future. So we talk about scheme fit, the connection with Ajero Evero, their new defensive coordinator, possible need. They can move on from one of the other corners, things like that. So a reason I did bump them down, because listing all those things that I just listed, it looks like yes, okay, this is it's a good connection here. It could work, good landing spot, but they may need to keep their draft picks because that might be a team looking to trade up into the first round to get their quarterback. We've already heard, it was actually a report this morning that teams have already called the Bears, multiple teams, about trading for that first overall pick. So maybe they don't trade the first over. Maybe they trade to another pick close to that, but not quite first. But they may be looking. It's really going to depend on if they want a rookie quarterback. If they know they don't want one, they're not going to trade. Then this becomes more likely. Trading for Jalen Ramsey becomes, I probably put them at 2, contention for 1. So that is a huge factor. And I guess their thoughts and if they need a starting corner or not, I think most people say they probably do. But we'll see. Panthers have that fit factor there. Number 2, a team that I had in the top tier landing spots when I talked about it on Twitter, but I really bumped them up, and that's the Las Vegas Raiders, who need a corner. We knew already they need a corner very, very badly. Very badly. I mean, Max Crosby's a stud. Chandler Jones has that stud in him. He had an off year, but those guys need a little bit more time to get after the quarterback because the ball was just getting out so quick. Rest of the defense just wasn't good, really. So they badly need another corner. The corners they do have, some of them are free agents. They have a lot of cap space. They could actually clear more as well, possibly. They have an early second round pick they can package along to trade. They're not going to trade their early first round pick. I do like the fit. They're more of a man coverage team, which Patrick Graham usually is, which I'm a fan of his defense, but he's implemented some zones in past years, looking at the Giants, when he was with them. So Ramsey definitely could work that way. Originally, I had him lower because they're focused on the quarterback position and, are they going to trade picks for Rodgers, which was my feeling for a bit. So then they don't really have the picks, and then the cap space takes a hit, even though they still would have some. But now I'm beginning to think that they may not go for Rodgers. They may go a cheaper route so they can do other things and use that good amount of cap space. So maybe go with not a cheap quarterback, but a cheaper quarterback, and you don't have to trade draft picks for them, and then therefore they can get Ramsey and then make that defense a little bit better because they do need a stud corner in there. So that's why the Raiders are kind of getting bumped up the list there. I think it's a legit landing spot. Number 1, which just makes the most sense by far out of any of them, is the Detroit Lions because they don't have to focus on offense too much this offseason, mainly on defense, looking at the cornerback position. They could use multiple corners, to be honest, an outside and in a slot. They need an inside linebacker, and they could use an interior defender as well. If the Lions do those things, they're looking pretty good, and they have the cap space to do it. They're a little more appealing now, maybe to free agents, and they know how to draft. They have the draft capital, so they'll be looking for a corner, possibly multiple, possibly a guy like Ramsey, and in the draft, it makes sense. They have 2 first-round picks. They have 2 second-round picks, so that's fantastic. There's a connection in there as well. Brad Holmes, who's been a fantastic GM for the Detroit Lions, actually was with the Rams, so he is familiar with Jalen Ramsey. He knows how good of a player he is, obviously. So there's and then fit-wise, they did run a ton of man coverage. I wish they ran a little bit more zone to fit Ramsey a little bit more. But to me, they're not one of those teams that is, I know you can debate this, but that is just so stuck in their ways where they're going to run, man. They're going to run cover 1, 2-man under, cover 0. I think they'll be willing to adjust a little bit, even though Aaron Glenn ran mainly, even with the Saints. There was a lot of man. They ran a lot of 2-man under for as long as I can remember. But I think Ramsey can still work though. I think he could still work in that. So there's a lot of reasons this makes sense. The only argument I have on why they wouldn't do it is because Brad Holmes and the Lions have been so good at drafting, these last 2 years, that they just trust themselves. Like, all right, cornerback class is good. I know we can get the good young players. Let's just do that. Let's just go get a young corner and get the good players like we've been doing it. So that would be the reason I could see actually them not doing it, trusting their evaluations in the draft. there though. But there's just so many reasons it makes sense, and having those draft picks to be able to trade, the Lions do make the most sense. But I can see a lot of these other teams as well. But kind of going on to different scenarios that I came up with, and I would like for you guys to comment on which ones you guys think make the most sense. Maybe none of these do, but this would be from the Lions, who are my most likely landing spot as of right now. Option A is just the Rams get that first round pick, 18th overall, because I do think Ramsey is worth a first round pick. But mainly talking about late first, 18th is just after the middle, right in the middle, around 16. So, but right in the middle there. So that's a possibility because Ramsey's worth that in my opinion, but maybe you say that's a little too rich. Another interesting scenario I came up with. Well, I did come up with one originally that was, the Rams still get 18, but the Lions get a pick back, whether it's a mid-round pick or whatever, but I still don't think the Rams would like that because they're trying to gain picks right now, not even though they get a better pick, not even out. So I came up with this one. The Rams get 18 and 55. So the first round pick, which is a pretty rich first round pick, I think, to most people, because most people are expecting at most a late first round pick. So a middle first round pick, and then a second round pick, 55 overall, which is the Lions second round pick. So that's a lot of value, but the Lions come up and get the Rams early second round pick. So 18, maybe it's a little too rich. All right, we'll swap second round picks basically. So I thought that actually made some sense. You could argue that, maybe the Rams, because Ramsey he's an elite player, maybe they need a little bit more with that as well. Maybe they're looking to get a mid or a day 3 pick. Another option is the Rams don't get a first round pick, but they just get 2 seconds. So a package of day 2, 48, 55, 2 second round picks from the Lions. It's pretty good, because some people think they're going to get multiple day 2 picks. And maybe those people don't think it's 2 seconds. Maybe they think it's a second, a third. Maybe they can throw something else in there as well. But here it is 2 seconds, a possibility. Okay, I'm a big Ramsey guy. I think maybe he's a little more value in this, but this is kind of realistic based on what I've been hearing. But then instead of both those second round picks, maybe the Lions don't want to give up both. You give 48 still, the early second round pick, which if there's no first, 48's got to be involved. And then that third round pick, which is 81, plus a third round pick next year, which the Rams could be looking for picks next year if they're trying to go in some rebuild. So a second, 2/3. Again, I think it could be worth a little bit more, but this is kind of just based on a mixture of what I think and then what other people kind of are expecting when it comes to the trade. And these, maybe they could be tweaked a little bit with a later day 3 pick involved somehow, or maybe a player's involved. So those are some scenarios that I like that made some sense. So you guys can comment which if you had to pick a scenario, which one, and then if you had to change it, how would you change it? Where we can talk about that in the comments, but we're always talking with you guys on our Twitter there. So you also can comment and talk to us on Twitter with, maybe if you had different rankings of landing spots. Maybe the Lions aren't one. Maybe the Panthers or the Titans are such a good fit that you got them up there. The Raiders, I've been a little higher on them recently. Maybe they're up there. Maybe one of the wild card teams is higher for you. So curious to see everyone's thoughts. But, we got you covered with all this stuff, all this content, all this coverage, whether it's here on YouTube or on Twitter. So make sure you follow us on Twitter. Make sure you like, subscribe, and turn notifications on. All that be much appreciated. Any link you're looking for, pin in the comments. That's going to do it, though. Thanks everyone for watching. Goodbye.